Hey everyone, this is Erath with SoCal GG, and I wanted to give you a video on strategies and what to do for land versus underwater specifically. This is a concept that I often like to practice in games, and I think it's very important, especially for newer players, to understand what it means to engage underwater as a land-based nation and what sort of special things you need to bring on board to be able to contest underwater. So I'm going to start this out with when should you even consider going land versus underwater? And I can open up a few games to give this as an example. Let's take a look here. So this might be a good example of when you might want to consider going underwater. We can see they're maybe down to their capital. They have a good force there. They don't have a whole lot of provinces. They've been booted off the land mostly. And I've probably got about 3 times the amount of lands that they would have. So in that case, and in a few of these different cases, let's take a look at another one that I've got up and running too. You can see this this underwater nation here. They're actually expanded onto land, and they're taking a capital. Versus, so they've probably got quite a few provinces here. And me, on the other hand, not really. I mean, I might be getting there, but I've still got a little while to go. So, in general, you want to have at least 2 to 3 times the amount of provinces as the underwater player. If not, you need to kick them off land before even thinking about underwater. Number 2 is you need to have access to the right magic paths. I believe that water, death, earth, and air are the right magic paths, and I'll get into why. Number 3 is you need to have access to construction 4 or greater usually. Unless you have some other special ways of fielding more numbers underwater. But a lot of it is relatively item dependent. Number 4 is you gain access to living castle or 3 red seconds. Or you already have the ability to build underwater forts. So that's usually a good sign of when you should really consider going underwater. And you don't have to get it right away, but these are both 2 spells that you'll need down the line to really have an underwater empire beyond taking an underwater player's capital. And just to show you what those guys are, we have Living Castle. It's a nature 4, water 1, range of 4 provinces, but you get a fort underwater. And then 3 red seconds. Same kind of deal, but for blood. It's just very important to have either one of these. What's really odd about this is, let me test something really quick. What's weird is it doesn't say here that it can target underwater provinces. So I'm gonna hop in here and see what we can do. Okay, let's go ahead. Cast Wish for Slaves. Let's cast Wish. change some stuff up really quick because I had a test game going on. Alright, and let's try to cast 3 red seconds. Yep, okay, just making sure, because that's really weird that it doesn't say anything about, oh, maybe yeah, almost all spells that can target underwater say that they can, and I was like, I know I've seen this plenty of times before, but it's just really odd. Okay, so back on track here. 3 red seconds and Living Castle are pretty useful for being able to get these fortresses later on after you've gotten something like a capital. It allows you to really make the most use out of the underwater territory that you have. Number 5 on that list of when should you even consider going land versus underwater is you gain special summons that require underwater. There's a lot of nations that have this. Maybe you get your water mages by taking a underwater province and building a lab and casting spells. That's a pretty good incentive. So what is there to gain? Well, one thing is you do have a pretty easy spell. Let's see if I'm spelling this wrong. Oh. There we go. So Voice of Tiamat is very useful for searching water provinces, which means you could get gems pretty quickly and for very cheap by capturing underwater territories. Another incentive is gold. Pretty obvious that you could get income from these, although there is some issues with tracing over the land-water barrier, but it can be a good source of income. Water gems, that's another good reason. If you take the water player's capital, it'll help you become the next underwater power. And then the safety that you're granted, albeit not as strong because you're not an underwater nation, so you don't have that difference in unit performance that they would normally have, because you have poor amphibians and such. So we can see this guy's aquatic. You have aquatic, and you have your poor amphibians, and they have certain penalties to them, and I want to see if the penalties are basically -4, I believe, on attack and defense skill, and another penalty to your move speed for units that are not aquatic. Actually, we could search that up. Okay, let's see here. Here we go. Poor amphibians may also enter, but will receive penalties to their attributes: -3 attack and defense skill, +1 encumbrance, combat speed half. So that's pretty important. And even if you have water breathing, it's going to apply this penalty. You've then got your regular amphibious, and then this guy, let's see, unlike amphibious, aquatic units have -1, and that's basically it. So you just need to get some air breathing stuff for them to be able to come out of the water onto land, but they don't suffer quite as much as everybody else, although it's kind of built into their gear. Aquatic units, or even amphibious units from underwater nations, usually have gear that encumbers them further than most other nations would. So casting spells like Curse of Stones and Rigor on aquatic or amphibious units when they've gone on land really hurts them because they're relying on being able to basically just survive the battle with low fatigue, but you're making it very hard for them because they have that built-in encumbrance. So I got a little distracted there, but you know, that's going to happen. So what else is there to gain from fighting underwater players? Better access to the map in general. Many water territories are surrounded completely by lands, and this grants you a lot of opportunities to maybe go for other thrones. In fact, let's go take a look at my other game going on. So as you can see here, gaining access to these thrones would be really nice if I managed to take this capital. And I'd get access kind of all around this area. Unfortunately, in this game, I couldn't really do that. I gave it a good shot, but I had a massive coalition issue, so I had to go solve that problem. But as you can see, if I managed to get this, which I was pretty dang close to making that move, I'd get all this access to all these thrones and all these other players. So that'd be pretty nice, especially if I got my army set up for underwater, and I'd be able to do things like 3 red seconds in here, or living castle. Alright, so back onto this. You can also interrupt their tall win con, and what I mean by that is there's very many players where underwater they either go for like an apocalyptic win con, or everybody but them loses win con, and it is useful to interrupt players that are building towards that, and it doesn't take a whole lot to raid underwater, because often underwater players don't defend lands the same way that land-to-land borders do, just kind of by the coziness of having a land friend. So, special note on that though, if you do not take an underwater player's capital, then they're going to get it back. They're going to get all those water provinces back if you don't take their capital, or if you don't have a fort to contest underwater. And don't underestimate sieging an underwater fort. They are extremely hard to take down. You're going to need at least 3 times the amount of troops you would normally need to siege down an underwater fort, and you need certain spells to be able to even try. So, what you need in order to have a chance to take the capital, let's go over these guys. One is going to be some pretty obvious stuff. You're going to need, oh, shoot. You're going to need, oh, there they are, summon water power. You're going to need that to, and sorry, just to start this off, you don't need water. What I mentioned before is you need water, death, earth, or air. Those are the big ones, and I'm going to go over each of these individually. So, for water, you're going to want summon water power. You just plain need that, especially if you have a lot of water ones. You need to buff them up so they can start churning out elementals. The other spell you need, summon water elemental. Water elementals are beasts underwater. Well, actually, just look at these stats. Underwater regeneration 20%. All these crushes that are armor piercing. They do quite a lot of damage too. They're also resistant to slash, blunt, pierce. So these guys are really tough. They're hard to take out and they need a specialty tool to kill them. But when you engage underwater, you need these tools to engage the other players too. So you're going to want those water elementals if you've got water. Another one that is massive, Shark Attack. It's Conch 6, so it's a little bit up there, but the nice thing about Shark Attack is it works on underwater forts, and the sharks go past the walls. Very often, if you fight an underwater player, it's a given that you're both casting this. So be ready to prepare your army for being attacked at the rear from sharks too. They're pretty dangerous compared to wolves, for those that are familiar with how. And so those are the essentials for water. I'd say summon water power, shark attack, summon water elemental, and I'm talking about essentials that are reachable by mid-game usually. There's a lot more that are better than that, and there's a lot that are notable. So I'm going to go over those notable ones too. So, a nice summon is sea serpents. So I do like these guys. Once you get a lab underwater to be able to summon them. Their fear is good. They've got decent HP. They take buffs pretty well. Their attack density is very poor, but they're pretty squishy. I mean, pretty tanky, opposite of squishy. So very notable spells that, I mean, they're almost mandatory, but I'd say the other ones are way more mandatory. So Wave Warriors, very great spell underwater. The strength penalty you get can sometimes be a problem. You don't want to get encased in ice and have to make strength checks when you penalize yourself like that. But the bludgeoning resistance really helps, especially against those water elementals. Another one, and these are all kind of essential to even the water players, Friendly Currents. This is a nice buff to get your guys running across the field. I need to get that lobby notes mod, but it also, I believe, provides reinvigoration as well to your unit. So you're going to want that so you don't get bogged down, especially if you have a large encumbrance penalty to your units to begin with. Another one that's, or another few that are great to have, Falling Frost. Wait. No, not Falling Frost. Which one was I thinking of? No. So, that's not the right spell. Yeah. Frozen Heart. Frozen Heart's a really good spell for underwater, but it's more of a counter rating tool for SCs and thugs, but it is really nice to have, and I think especially because water elementals do not have frost resistance. Correct, so oh wait, no, doesn't work on them because they are inanimate, and I think frozen. Let's take a look here. No effect on inanimate, so no. So I guess this is more of a defensive tool on killing those the land versus underwater players that are killing you, because it won't do anything to those water elementals. Maybe you could snipe the mages if they have higher HP than the rest of the province defense, So they might have one of those Pearl Kings, and I believe they do not have built-in. Oh man, they do have built-in cold resistance. So even then, it's a little tough on them there. You'll be able to do some damage to them, and because they have the high HP, they're going to get primaried, but it's not going to do as much as you'd like. But you could use it to try and snipe some of those living creatures that are summoning water elementals. Even the Atlanteans, I believe, have some frost resistance too. Oh, we can just check right here. Cold resistant 5, so they're not going to be immune to it, because I believe frozen is 10 base. Yeah, 10 plus. So could still hurt them, but that built-in resistance is going to be tough to deal with. So Frozen Heart is nice. Encase in Ice is also nice. It's still more of a defensive tool, though. This is stuff Underwater is going to like to use against you, so I'm not considering it absolutely essential for you. Water Ward is pretty nice to have as well. Let's take a look here. So it's just a massive buff for your units. Plus 5 defense is pretty epic. So you're going to want to use this. It's almost an essential, and it's good for the land versus underwater player. So you're going to want to put this in your repertoire. So there's a few items too that are definitely worth mentioning. Ring of Water Breathing, Manual of Water Breathing if you have Nature Water Cross Path. Sea King's Goblet is another really nice one, but it is construction 6, so it takes a while to get there. This is one a lot of people like for being able to take those big forces underwater. Ice Brand is pretty useful underwater. It does its thing. Frostbrand, okay. So pretty useful there too. Cross paths with water in general, the one I definitely want to mention is Water Nature. It's fantastic for land versus underwater. Not just in that you could get things that nature has for thugs and stuff like Vine Shield, but sorry, a couple other water items before I get on the cross path tangent. Shambler Skin Armor, really quick, easy way to get underwater with thugs. And the Wave Breaker, that's another nice one that can automatically plop on your friendly currents. So with those cross paths though, there's some really solid ones. The summons are pretty good. I like the, I know a lot of people are not going to like these, but Sea Dogs are actually alright, as well as the, where are these guys? Well, maybe I'm blind right now, but what the heck? Where did sea lions go? Oh, God, their names always throw me off. The sea lions are actually pretty good for a cross path. I guess they're called a Leo Campus. But their bite and claw is pretty solid with their strength. They got decent HP. So these guys are actually pretty good. It's just they're aquatic, so you need to get that lab underwater. Some more notes on the cross paths. It's nice to have Moss Body to drop on your water elementals. If you're familiar with buffing elementals, this is great. Makes them extremely hard to take out. Expect the water players to use this against you if they've got that cross path. Bone Melter is nice underwater as well for that cross path. So it just annihilates stuff. Ethereal units are nearly immune to this though, so I don't know if this works on elementals or not. It says ethereal units, but they're not ethereal. Maybe this is worth testing out really quick, actually. See how well Bone Melter does against... Actually, this is going to be a long video, but maybe that works on water ellies, because they're technically not ethereal. Alright, so another cross path spell that's obviously good underwater is Foul Vapors. It's a nature water, but I'm throwing it into the same bucket. If they're not prepared for this, this can really cause some havoc. I know a lot of underwater players like to ball up in one spot, so this can really catch them off guard. Cave crabs are kind of nice to bring underwater. They're big dudes. So that's a water earth cross path if you've got that. And then there's a few more, but these aren't, you don't need them again, but these are big ones that can help. Thetis' Blessing. So, allows all troops to enter the sea and breathe underwater. So that's pretty massive. And then Sea of Ice. Freezes the ocean. So you can no longer cross through that land-sea barrier. So it's a pretty big shutdown, but often players can dispel these or respond to these. And you don't want Thetis' Blessing when someone dispels it while you're in the water. That's going to be painful. Everything's going to drown. Let's see here. Another thing with water is you could take a water-breathing Bless to kind of skip a bunch of this, but you need to take note that you still have the full pour amphibian penalty. So you've still got this guy right here. So that's kind of tough to deal with, but the other thing I want to mention about that is the physical damage types while you're underwater. Okay, well, I can't find it right now, but basically what it does is for any length greater than 1, I believe it is, you get penalized on attack and defense for each length value greater than 1. I believe that's it. It might be greater than 0, but I believe it's greater than 1 on only slashing and bludgeoning damage. So it doesn't do anything to piercing, and that's why you'll notice all these underwater nations have spears. So you don't want to use long length swords and clubs unless you're doing like an AoE attack with them while you're fighting underwater. If you took something like water breathing, so don't immediately think, oh, because I took water breathing I can fight underwater. No, your guys are still going to suck because they have this. But hopefully you're going to make up for it by having more provinces than the underwater player. And that's a big part of this, is you need more provinces than the underwater player. That's the weakness of underwater, is you get kicked out of land and you get stuck in a pond. And then people have 4 times, not 4 times, but 2 times to 3 times the amount of provinces as you. So they can use that gem weight ratio to try and push into your realm. So that's everything I want to talk about for water. Boy, this is going to be a while. Earth. I think Earth is extremely strong underwater. I'm going to try to go through this a little quicker. Summon Earth Power is a spell you'll need. Conjuration 3 gives you your bonus Earth magic and some reinvigoration. People forget about that, though. It's nice. Summon Earth Elemental. That's something you're going to want. Earth Elementals still do pretty good underwater. Not quite as good as Water Elementals, but you know, they can still take buffs. You can still do neat things with them to crunch up chaff. Another spell I think is very strong for Earth underwater is Maws of the Earth. So this is pretty brutal, even underwater. Recommend spamming this as much as possible, because you'll really bog down their entire army, just like anybody else. So I consider Maws of the Earth, Summon Earth Elemental, and Earth Power the essential, absolute essential spells for Earth trying to break in underwater. All of the beautiful Earth buffs are applied here too. You know, Strength of Giants, Legions of Steel, Marble Warriors, Weapons of Sharpness, Army of Golden Lead. You're going to want all of those too. They all work underwater, which is great. Special shout out to Melancholia. It doesn't do too much, but it does work underwater, and underwater players like to blob up often in the capital when you've raided them, and they like to make it difficult to take their capital. So slamming them with these spells does help desert a lot of their armies. And we could check to see what kind of morale we're dealing with. 15 is pretty high. So morale's pretty good. It's not going to get a lot of them, but it is kind of a nice way to remotely start to soften up that capital, because it is extremely hard to take those on. So the other thing Earth has is summons. Really nice summons for piling up power to contest underwater. Clockwork Soldiers. They work underwater. They're not amazing, but they get the job done. Clockwork Horrors. They also work relatively well. You know, they got length 1, so they're not going to be penalized that much by it. You could send the Crusher constructions too. They could take some buffs and cause some problems underwater. I think, yeah, so no length to it. And then Mechanical Men. So these guys are pretty useful underwater too. So you could bring all of these with Earth Magic to start contesting underwater, because they're all amphibious, or poor amphibians. Items. Earth has a lot of decent items in general, but none of them are particular for underwater. The Gate Cleaver is good in general, because you could break through forts more easily. So if you need to slam a fort really quick that's not their capital, this is really important for getting to it quick before that underwater blob can get to you. Dwarven hammers are kind of obvious, so you could use that to craft more water-breathing items for even cheaper. Hammer of the Mountains, still pretty useful underwater. Being able to... Why is it not displaying? Oh, there we go. So being able to have that stun is pretty nice underwater. It is bludgeoning damage though on length 3, so might have issues actually dealing a tough damage. Great Swords of Sharpness are okay underwater. The length is kind of a problem, so maybe go with the Spear of Sharpness, or Pike. Which one is it? Maybe it's just the enchanted spear. It's piercing damage, so it kind of do the work. But yeah, the problem with the Greatsword is going to be that length penalty. Length 2, it's not that bad though. It could still work underwater. The Cat Eyes Amulet is kind of useful if you want the stealth bonus for Bane Venom Charming underwater if you're getting booted out and you want to salt on your way out. One interesting one on the crosspath side that I like, if you're trying to salt, is the Implementer Axe. Pillaging underwater is a thing I really like to do. So when you take those provinces, if you're getting booted out, you can take a lot of their wealth with you on the way out with this. Pillage bonus is nice. Let's see here. Another useful crosspath is for the Crystal Enslaved Matrix if you've got Earth Astral. If you don't have a way to get those communions underwater, or you don't have a way to get your water mages communioned up, this is really useful. And then another special mention I have is the Elfbane. So it's actually pretty good at taking down the forms of the water elementals. The thing is, it doesn't slay them, but it does slay that form, and it moves down to the lower form. So you shrink the elemental more and more the more you hit it with Elfbane. So it's pretty nice. Alright, on to the next one. Death. Death is really good at breaking into underwater. And a reason why is the absolute boatloads of summons that you can bring with you to contest it. So I'm not going to go through all of them, because basically all the death summons can work underwater. I'll mention some special things. This is a pretty obvious one, but Amulet of the Dead is great for getting a force ready to go underwater, or for even raiding underwater. It's a cheap raiding tool. With the Dwarven Hammer, you can get some good bonuses there. And using Amulet of the Dead on basic reanimation spam actually is pretty good for getting a good pile of chaff together if you got something like Bone Tribe. Just need Death 1, easy peasy, plop it on that guy. I've had a game where I've gotten a enchantment reduction for spells, and I just plopped that amulet on dudes and summoned huge hordes of skeletons. It was great. Another few. I'm just going to mention a couple that are kind of nice. Ghosts are good. I'll show you the spell so you can see that. Oh, I guess it's not called Ghost. It's probably called like, I don't know. Well, never mind. It is Summon Ghost. Okay. So this is a pretty good one. Ghosts work great underwater, take buffs. Banes and Wraiths work well underwater. Behemoths, I believe, are pretty nice underwater too. Yeah, so these guys are pretty fun to throw underwater. It's just, they make really terrible sounds, so you're gonna make people's ears bleed. So I don't know what happened there. I was recording and I kept talking for like 20-30 minutes and didn't realize the video stopped. So I'm going to try to hurry up through this because I already went through it, unfortunately. Ghosts are solid underwater, Banes and Wraiths, and Behemoths. Except they make crazy weird noises. But these guys are pretty good underwater. Spells I want to talk about with Death is Shadow Blast. Does wonders against those communion heavy nations like Relie that like to bunch up together, because you can lob this straight into their group and make a mess of those communions. Soul Vortex is pretty solid too, for a variety of reasons. You can mix this up with several things, and it has a lot of different applications, but it works underwater, and it's a pretty good spell in general. Another good one a lot of people don't think about is Skeletal Legion, because the water nations generally have spears. So Skeletal Legion helps give you the resistance you need to get through that. Bone Grinding is another really good spell underwater. Just rips apart armies that aren't prepared for this. Giving the limp and affliction and damage will make a huge difference in a battle. Horde of Skeletons, I don't think I even really need to mention that. It is very good underwater. Rigor Mortis is another solid spell that also works underwater too. A lot of fatigue damage. And then one I like because water tends to bottle up when they're getting raided heavily into their cap is Leprosy. So this can cause some massive damage if they pile into their capital. Items I kind of like for Death underwater is the Shade Mail, particularly, and this is Death Earth. If you put it on someone with a Bane Venom Charm, if you're going to lose underwater, if you know you're going to lose, because this takes out what little province income they have. And then the Horror Helm and Fear items, they work underwater too. So getting that Fear bonus is nice. And that's about it for Death. And I mentioned the Implementer Axe before. Pretty good for salting. Alright. Back on to Air. So, with Air, there's a few essential spells I believe you'll need for breaking into underwater. Fog Warriors, extremely solid. Bring it with you underwater if you can at all times. It's a very good spell. Will help soak up a ton of damage. Lightning Bolt works underwater and is good to use as support spam if you're getting LE spammed, or if they're just doing low mage deployments. Phantasmal Army is actually pretty solid underwater. Helps get you a lot of summons that clog up the battlefield. Another massive one underwater is Shimmering Fields. So this does insane amounts of damage, and it's weird because it's like lightning stuff, but it works underwater. Use it. Kind of a neat application I like is Seeking Arrow, because often underwater players will do small deployments of water mages with water LE spam. Well, if you spam Seeking Arrow at them, you could kill them before capturing their province. I love that usage of this spell. They'll respond to it with, you know, rabbit talismans and stuff like that, but it's a good way to pick off those little squads that deploy water LEs. Not a super good one, but Confusion works underwater too, kind of nice. Causes crowds to kind of get freaked out and not do what they're supposed to. It's not anything to really send home about, but it does work underwater. And then the Blood Cross Path for Storm Demons. That is a massive one. Storm Demons are crazy good underwater. Their lightning ball things work. I think they could fly underwater too, because they have Flies and Storm, if I remember correctly. Very solid units underwater. Items, and this is where Air really does shine, is they have some of the best SC items for underwater, and the reason being is they have a lot of lightning damage, and that often can counter water elementals. Lightning Spear, very good against water elementals. Thunder Whip, really good at clogging up multiple water elementals by stunning them. Thunderbow is kind of nice too, underwater. You wouldn't think it would work underwater, it does, and it could shock units, so I recommend it. Storm Spool, very solid underwater, especially because I believe it works even if you get encased in ice. So when things hit you, water elementals hit you with their multiple attacks, they still get stunned. So you can follow up attack on them. Spelling time. Scutata Volturnus, another solid one. Air Earth Cross Path. These auto spells are great for taking on elementals, water elementals. Let's see. I'm forgetting one of these. Yeah. Spirit Helmet. Another good auto spell for taking on water elementals. And just a reminder, for these SCs, even though you could take on the water elementals, you also need frost resistance of some shape or form. So, I don't know, Ring of Frost, there's a few items that get you cold resistance that can help when someone has Frozen Heart spam. So you gotta watch out for that. It's good to put that on there and take your lightning damage at the same time. And we can actually see, let's see, I think I've got something. Let's take a look here. So a few more items that do work for underwater SCing is Star of Thraldom can kind of work. It doesn't catch the elementals too long in it, but it can help. So I recommend this, as long as you have your other shock-based items, it can do pretty solid. Alright. One problem with Air, though, is just that, again, they don't have a lot of summons, so it's hard to field units underwater. I don't know if I mentioned this too, but Barrel of Air is another good one. So this helps bring some more units underwater. Alright, so now I'm going to go over special mentions. So for fire, there's not a lot, but if you have to, then, I mean, Mace of Eruption can work underwater. It's not great. Technically, the Firebrand can too. But why did you take it over the Frostbrand? I don't know. Maybe someone's stacking different resistances. Interesting one is Rod of the Phoenix still works underwater because Incinerate works, but it's more of an anti-SC kind of deal. So I don't know if you'd use it too much. It reminds me, Incinerate works underwater too, so that can work. Blindness works too. It's really not good, but you can make stuff blind underwater. One that is kind of nice is Raging Hearts can crank up the unrest in their capital, so it's pretty useful. Could maybe prevent them from making a lot of dudes. Another kind of weird one is Hydrophobia. It's kind of funny to think about this being used underwater. Like, now you're afraid of everything. Just you're living in constant fear because you have hydrophobia underwater. It does work. It's not great though. Then there's Astral. Astral is not, I mean, it's good. It's supplementary to many of the things you have, but in and of itself, it's not going to really help you break in underwater because it just can't deploy forces properly. So you need to supplement them with something else. Spells that obviously work underwater, and really I would not without any of these. We got Mind Burn, we've got Mind Hunt, Teleportation. I'm not going to go through and show all these, but Teleportation, Soul Slay, Astral Shield still works underwater. The big ones all still work that are very nicely supplementary, so if you do have Astral, do bring this. Anti-Magic, Will of the Fates. These are really useful in almost any circumstance, including underwater. Time Stop is good. Doom, Body Ethereal, Magic Duel. Astral Tempest, it's kind of an interesting one that can do some damage underwater. It's really high up there though. I mean, should we even really be talking about that? I don't know. If you have Astral Fire, you can do Astral Fires, which does work underwater too. It's not great, especially because it has magic resist negates, but you can use it. It's pretty good. And obviously with Astral, Communions and Power of the Spheres are pretty nice underwater for your other path. So maybe you've got water on the sky and you need to buff them up some more. Power of the Spheres to get that. Paralyze is also okay underwater. But yeah, aside from that, there's some weird applications I guess I could share. Ring of Returning with Frost Resist. Mage Raiders can sometimes work nice and waste water gems on those little mage squads. So you could Ring of Returning on a Frost Resist mage and he goes in there and causes some shenanigans and runs away. Nature special mentions. So your typical buffs work there, like Army of Giants, Mass Protection, Regen, Relief, and Tangle spells. Swarm is a great deal worse, I think, underwater. It creates like stuff like this, like large shrimp. Like, what is this? Tiny slap. Oh no. Maybe I think shrimp have like a lot of hands. Maybe they can slap like 100 times. No, but anyways, not very good to spam Swarm underwater. Creeping Doom doesn't even work underwater, so that's kind of off the table. The regen and buff items are still useful for thugs underwater, but you really want the nature water cross path to make much use out of nature, aside from the buffs. Blood, not very good at all, or applicable underwater. Just remember, Bone Fiends don't work underwater. I discovered this the hard way. I think they're skeletons and they can do that, but no, they're demons. They're scared of the water, I guess. The big mentions for blood underwater, and it's actually massive, is 3 red seconds that I just showed a while ago. Super useful. It's way high up there though. Infernal Disease also does work underwater, so you can remote assassination dudes still, so that's kind of good. But otherwise you can't bring slaves underwater, so there's not a lot you could do. You could get SCs in the forms of Heliophagi and vampires. So these guys are, you're still gonna need to put something on them to make them go underwater, but they're good. And vampires, I think they just can't cross rivers, but I believe you could send them underwater. Let's double check actually. We're gonna need to go to. Okay, let's see here. Holy crap. Oh no, wait, really? Never mind, I guess you literally can't go underwater, even with a ring of water breathing. Never mind. Well, there goes that idea. So yeah, blood, minus 3 red seconds. So in either case, hopefully this told you what each path is capable of and which ones can do a fantastic job underwater and which are not so great. And hopefully this gives you a little bit more confidence to go underwater if you're a new player, because you now know what the tools are. As some notes on that, the biggest issue you'll face, period, is securing forts to lock down the ocean. So that's why 3 red seconds or living castle is so important. Otherwise you're delegated to salting the earth on their side, or delaying a tall wind con on their end. Or sealing them off with Sea of Ice, or using Thetis' Blessing to get water breathing, or taking a water breathing bless. But some strategies to mention in general on this is underwater is usually open to several unprotected fronts, so it's a good idea to harass them until they feel like counterattacking you on land with a significant force. So if this was a water province as an example and I attack it and take it, usually the water players will often like to come here, roll on this, and then piss you off by hitting your land. Once you take down that land force is when you should deploy your underwater strategy to go for their cap, because they're going to think they have this downtime, this recovery time, and you're not going to give it to them. Another important thing is raiding underwater players really hurts them pretty bad, because they don't have very many provinces. If they've got 10 provinces and you have 30, and you raid out 5 of their 10, well, there goes half their income. So maybe having another player participate and giving them like a 3-4 turn heads up so they could get some underwater capable raids ready, you could rip out their income from under them pretty quickly when they don't expect it. Just gonna have to make sure you could get through those water mages that might be defending their other provinces. So yeah, underwater players in general, from my experience, have a certain cozy, warm feeling about being able to recover during that downtime. So try and exploit that as best as you can. And if you know you're getting booted out, then take down those provinces with you, because that's all they got. All right, have a good one, you guys. Hopefully this helps.